Let's turn now to Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas, now running for president on the Republican side. Governor, you just heard Jim Obergefell. What's your response?
You know, I'm deeply moved by his comments, and I understand his personal passions. But I would warn people that what we have seen this week is something that changes not so much the product, but the process of how we govern. We've always been a nation of law. We're now a nation of men. What happened this week, is so brilliantly pointed out by Justice Scalia, is that this was not done through the legislative process. This was done through a court edict of 5 unelected lawyers, a part of a committee who decided that they knew better than the legislators who actually get to make law, that they know better than the people who voted in over 30 states to affirm traditional marriage. And George, this case wasn't so much about a matter of marriage equality. It was marriage redefinition. And I think people have to say, if you're going to have a new celebration that we're not going to discriminate, may I ask, are we going to now discriminate against people of conscience, people of faith, who may disagree with this ruling? Are they going to be forced either out of business, like the florists, the caterers, the photographers, like the CEO of Mozilla, who was run out of his job because of a personal contribution to support a proposition in California that actually won on the ballot? Are we going to trade one level of what's called discrimination for a new level of discrimination against people of faith?
So what exactly are you calling on people to do right now? You say resist and reject this judicial tyranny. Spell out exactly what that means.
George, judicial tyranny is when we believe that the courts have a right to bypass the process of law. And we've really seen it this week in 2 cases. In both the Obamacare case, which Justice Scalia said we should call it SCOTUS care because they have rescued it twice, ex cathedra to the law, and then in the same-sex marriage.
So are you calling for civil disobedience?
I don't think a lot of pastors and Christian schools are going to have a choice. They either are going to follow God, their conscience, and what they truly believe is what the Scripture teaches them, or they will follow civil law. They will go the path of Dr. Martin Luther King, who in his brilliant essay, The Letters from a Birmingham Jail, reminded us, based on what St. Augustine said, that an unjust law is no law at all. And I do think that we're going to see a lot of pastors who will have to make this tough decision. You're going to see it on the part of Christian business owners. You'll see it on the part of Christian university presidents, Christian school administrators.
What about county clerks? Should they issue same-sex marriage licenses?
If they have a conscientious objection, I think they should be excused. I'm not sure that every governor and every attorney general should just say, well, it's the law of the land because there's no enabling legislation. For the states who have a constitutional amendment that affirms marriage, as has been affirmed by the courts for 135 years since the ratification of the 14th Amendment, right up through the first time we've seen same-sex marriage enacted by any state, which was Massachusetts. In many states, you have overwhelming majorities of the people who voted to say that they believe marriage is between a man and a woman. George, what we've done, let me just ask people on the left, if we get a future court that is conservative, and that conservative court decides that this was a mistake and we're going to go back to traditional marriage, and we're also going to say that every unborn person is in fact a person and is absolutely guaranteed due process, and therefore we would strike down the idea of abortion from conception forward. Is the left going to be okay to let the Supreme Court make that decision?
Let me ask you this.
Because based on the response this week, I think they have to say, yes, that's fine. When 5 lawyers on the Supreme Court make that decision, we're okay with it.
So you're president today. Let's assume that for a second. Would you refuse to enforce this decision?
I would say when the Congress provides enabling legislation and the people's representatives vote and it gets to my desk, then we'll consider it. We've seen, though, something that is, I find very interesting. When the president lit up the White House the other night with rainbow colors, I guess that's his prerogative. If I become president, I just want to remind people that please don't complain if I were to put a nativity scene out during Christmas and say, you know, if it's my house, I get to do with it what I wish, despite what other people around the country may feel about it.
Let me talk about the other big issue of the week coming out of those killings in a church in South Carolina. We've seen cascade of states and businesses across the country take down the Confederate flag, refuse to sell the image of the Confederate flag. What's your reaction to that?
I think South Carolina made a proper decision, and the governor is to be commended for her leadership. She and Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham stepped up and said, if this is hurting people, if this is an offense, it's not worth it to be so divisive. And I think it's important to note, and I know this will cause a lot of angst, but it was Republicans who stepped up and made this happen. And let me give tribute to David Beasley, the Republican governor who back in the mid-'90s also attempted to do this and essentially lost his re-election because of it. And so when people talk about that Republicans don't care about race, I find that incredibly not only offensive, but, George, I find it just wrong-headed.
But actually, you said when President
Obama... in so
many
cases, whether it was Eisenhower or others, it was Republicans who were at the forefront of bringing civil rights.
You said when President Obama got elected that the GOP has done a pathetic job of reaching out to people of color. Do you think that's changing now? You just pointed out some examples of where it may be. And what did you make of President Obama's eulogy in South Carolina?
Well, I think so much of it was brilliant. And by the way, he has a wonderful voice. So post-presidential, I see a recording contract in his future. You know, there were times when I think he strayed into more of a political agenda rather than a true eulogy. I've presided at a lot of funerals 30 years ago and before, and I never used it as an occasion to do anything other than to focus on the person and the qualities of that person who was deceased and not to make it a time of cause.
Governor Mike Huckabee, thanks for joining us this morning.